All right, this is the fourth layout in this video series on teaching you where the cue ball goes using spin. And this is going to be the layout for the object ball and the cue ball in today's video, with the object ball glued to the rail. Now I chose this particular layout because many of us have been trapped all the way down at the bottom of the table trying to figure out how to get back up table. And as always, we're going to cover 8 different spins in total. First at slow speed, then medium speed, and then fast speed. And in all these videos, we always start off at slow speed, about 30% power, and we always start off with top spin. So we'll see top spin touch the bottom rail before going over to the left rail and then coming to rest. Top right spin is going to have a little bit of running spin, so we'll see it take off that left rail and spin up towards the middle of the table. So you see how with running English, we don't need that much power. Now with right spin, we don't have the top spin to propel it forward, so we'll have a lot of side spin, but we won't have as much movement like we did with top right. Now moving on to the bottom spins, this is bottom right, and we're going to see that cue ball come straight up the table because of the running English, which is why we get so much movement. But we're going to see something drastically different here with bottom spin because we don't have any rotation for the ball to grab off of. So the cue ball just slow bounces straight up. Now bottom left spin is an inside spin, so the ball's going to be spinning opposite of the direction of the cue ball's natural direction. But because it has a little bit of spin, we see it bounce off the rail more than it did with just bottom. Now left spin is maximum inside spin, so we're going to see that cue ball start to die after it hits that bottom rail and then just drift up table slowly. Now with top left spin, we're going to see a little bit more movement from the cue ball, but because it has inside spin, it slows down dramatically compared to top right spin. So let's actually look at the two together. Notice how much more movement we get with top right spin as it moves all the way up past the middle of the table, compared to top left spin, which slows down and stays in the bottom third half of the table. So now let's go ahead and bump up the speed from about 35% to about 55% power and see what happens when we use all of these different spins. All right, medium speed. First up is top spin, and we're going to see that cue ball come off that bottom rail. Remember, the object ball is glued to the rail for this demonstration. We're going to come off that left rail and then land perfectly in the middle of the table. But when we move on to top right spin, we have running English off the bottom rail. So it takes a wider angle heading to that left rail and then spins off the left rail heading towards the side middle pocket. So let's go ahead and watch the two together and notice how that cue ball spins off the bottom rail. Top right spin versus just top spin. Let's watch it one more time. Top spin is going to bring the cue ball to the middle of the table, where top right spin is going to take the cue ball towards the side pocket. So pay close attention to this one. Right spin is maximum inside spin and running spin, and is the preferred method for making balls that are glued to the rail. Let's watch that one more time and see how much movement we actually create. So because we're just putting right spin on the ball, it spins off the bottom rail and the left rail, which propels it all the way up to that top rail. Now with bottom right spin, because we have the bottom spin on it, the cue ball is going to slow down and not head all the way up the table like we did with just right spin. You see how it was still spinning right off of the bottom rail? Let's watch it again in slow motion and see how the cue ball is still spinning with right spin as it touches that left rail. And one more time before we move on to just bottom spin. Now bottom spin, we're going to see the cue ball hit off that bottom rail and come back a little bit towards me because of that backward spin, heading towards the top corner pocket before settling towards the middle of the table. But let's take a look back at soft speed with bottom spin, and we'll notice the cue ball just comes straight off that rail because the backwards rotation was lost. And then let's look at medium speed and soft speed, one on top of the other. Okay, bottom left spin is outside spin, so we're going to get a little bit more movement than we did with just bottom spin as that cue ball turns off that bottom rail, heading even more so towards the top right-hand corner pocket. All right, left spin is maximum outside spin, and we're going to get a lot of spin-induced throw, so this shot is not advisable, in my opinion. I think I missed this ball about 12 times, and I'll show you later in the video. Now, this would be a very good shot if the object ball was slightly off the rail, but when it's glued to the rail, it's a very difficult shot to make. So remember to use inside spin, not outside spin. Now, top left spin is also a little tricky, but not nearly as tricky as just left spin. So we'll see that cue ball bounce off the side rail and track towards that right side pocket. All right, we got 8 more spins for you at high speed this time. We're going to bump it up to about 70% power. And let's see where that cue ball ends up this time. All right, for high speed shots here, I'm going to add to the bottom rail whether it's high odds, medium odds, or low odds of making the shot. And with top spin, I'd say it's a medium odds of making the shot. Top right is a high percentage shot, and we're going to see a lot of movement throughout the table, going all the way up towards the top center of the table. Now, as I said earlier, with inside right spin, we're going to have a high percentage of making this shot when the object ball is glued to the rail, and we're going to get a lot of travel throughout the table, leaving the cue ball in a favorable position in the middle of the table, because now you can easily get to your next object ball if it's in any one of the 6 pockets. Now, bottom right is a very fun shot because we're going to have the bottom spin bring the cue ball off that bottom rail straight up the table, but because the cue ball still has right spin, we're going to see it take a wild right spin off of that very top rail. Now, bottom spin has a lot of backward spins, so we're going to see the cue ball grab off the bottom rail coming back towards the right side of the table. Okay, bottom left spin is going to be similar to bottom spin, but because we have the left spin on it, it's outside spin. So the cue ball is going to touch the bottom rail before heading all the way up table, touching the top rail and coming to a rest. Okay, remember we talked about this earlier? Do not use outside spin to a ball glued to the rail. And that's because the left spin is going to cause spin-induced throw. So if we freeze the frame right here, the cue ball has left spin on it, and it wants to throw the object ball this way because of the gearing effect. And then on top of all of that, if you do happen to make it, then you have this to look forward to.
Oh no.
So just for fun, let's count along and see how many times I missed this shot before finally making it.
Oh no. Fun times.
And as always, we'll finish off with top left spin. We'll see the cue ball take a huge arch off that bottom rail before heading back up table and finishing up by the top right hand pocket. Now, if you like this video, don't forget that this is part of a larger series to help you learn how to use cue ball spin so that you can predict where the cue ball is going to go next. And if you want to watch another video in this series, click on the link in the top corner of the screen. Click here if you want to watch another one of my videos.